I'm just going to get started because we were supposed to start at 11:10, and I honestly may not go till 12:15. I was just telling Debbie, what you guys are getting is 100% my last year of experience on this. Like, I am no expert. I just learned a ton going through this process with Gloria, and there are things that I wish I had known. Super helpful for you maybe to hear some of this stuff, but we talked about it a little bit before. Generally speaking, schools have different admission guidelines. I think everybody knows that, right? So if you go to a website of a school, we were talking yesterday about high school credits, they will tell you what the expectations are for the high school courses that your student is taking. And those vary based on the university. So I just pulled 3. University of Illinois requires 4 years of English. Math, 3 years required, 4 years recommended. Social sciences, 2 years required, 4 years recommended. Lab sciences, 2 years required, 4 years recommended. Language other than English, 2 years required, 4 years recommended. Flexible academic units, 2 years required, 4+ years recommended. But whereas, as opposed to Western, English, 4 years, social studies, 3 years, mathematics, 3 years, science, 3 years, other, 2 years of mini electives. You can see the difference in what that's looking at. I also pulled a private college. I pulled Hillsdale just because they're a private college with some of the same concepts that we do here. 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of biological and physical science, 3 years of history, and at least 2 years of foreign language. So just a heads up, and I'm looking, I mean, obviously there's nobody here I really need to say this to. Like, if your student is aspiring to a particular career and they have a particular college in mind early on, then we can craft their schedule from 9th grade on to meet some of those requirements. We were very gracious to, Trinity was very gracious to Gloria. Gloria wanted to apply to some schools that had some pretty rigorous demands. And so we allowed her to do some independent study work that gave her credits in areas that would be advantageous for her in applying to some of those things. I think we're doing some of that this year with a science that a student is doing independently because they need a 4th year of science, and we weren't offering, if we were going to offer one, it was going to be a science that they weren't interested in taking. So we can be flexible on those things, especially if you know what your student wants to study, but that might be a conversation at the 9th grade level or the 10th grade level that we can ensure that their transcript is going to be attractive to the school. I was just saying that different schools have different requirements for the courses that they want to see coming in. And some schools want 4 years of math. Some schools want 2 years of math. So knowing where your student is targeting is super helpful even at the freshman and sophomore stage, so that we can make sure that their transcript is going to be complete enough to make them a candidate for that school. Again, especially if they're looking at a competitive admissions school. All the schools are going to tell you that attention is given to academic rigor, the dedication to study. So see, again, if your student wants to be a doctor, if they're applying to a pre-med program or a biology program, they want to see that they've taken 4 years of science, like that they're dedicated to that line of study. Or if they want to do languages, you probably need to have more than 2 years of language for sure. Well, you want to apply to a competitive language program. So dedication to study. You can always go on, I went online a ton and looked at sites like Niche and Google to see what their average GPAs and SAT, ACT scores are for those admission programs. I think when we're talking about, so that's generally speaking for 4-year universities. For 2-year or supplemental programs, and as far as I know, the requirement is a high school degree, but they've made it to take a placement test to start off with and decide where they're going to level them in that program. That would be my guess. I have no idea what Stunsford requires. I'm out.
High school diploma, 18 years of age, and physical fitness.
Okay. Great. You're set. So let's talk testing. The major tests are the ACT and the SAT. My recommendation is that your students start taking those tests in the spring of their junior year. I think I've seen historically in the students that I know their test scores, everybody did the best in that spring of their junior year. Even if they take it their senior year, the test scores don't necessarily get better. And there's one exception to that. I do know somebody who took the SAT 8 times to get the score that they wanted and ended up getting the score that they wanted. So you would have to be extremely dedicated to do that. There's a lot of colleges and universities that are still test blind right now. I think Gloria had the option to apply test blind to maybe 3 universities. So some of them are not. Some of them have now done away with the test blind. So you have to submit it. Generally speaking, SAT is a more logistically focused and technical, even though it has math and language arts. Even the stuff that's language arts has to do a lot with how you are processing and reasoning through the stuff that you're reading. The ACT is more subject focused and has more content understanding. ACT has math, English, reading, science, although Mrs. Spangler told me that recently the science has shifted not so much from you knowing science content, but you being able to disseminate scientific charts or interact scientific information that's presented to you. You're not going in there and they're saying, okay, what's 37 on a periodic table, right? That's not what we're talking about. It's really just how are you able to process information that comes from a scientific perspective. Is that correct? Okay. Both of them are accessed and registered for online through their programs. You have to create an account. Gloria's least favorite thing in the entire world right now is College Board, which runs the SAT, I believe. But that's the way you do it. There is a fee associated with it. SAT is all digital now. And so you have to bring an approved device. In order to take it, you have to have a laptop that can work. Chromebooks are not approved. They do not work. They don't hold the software program, download the software program, and Chromebooks don't work with that. So I believe we have a few devices here at school that we could potentially modify if there's a student that doesn't have a device. We grabbed Eric's work computer and sent it to Gloria because the rest of us all use Chromebooks, and that worked fine. And the ACT is all still on. Was all still on paper last year, and I think they were trialing some electronic, so probably in the next few years they'll move to digital, is my guess. As far as using your scores, schools have what's called super scores, and that's where you get to take your highest score from the sections and put them together to give you the most advantageous scores. You need to look at whether or not your school is willing to do that. Some of them say we absolutely super score. If you got a 600 on the SAT math your first time and a 650 on the English, but the second time you got a 680 on the math and only a 500 on English, we'll take the 680 and the 650 and put them together and give you that highest score. That's called super score. When you're doing the college application process and you have to fill out all that information, you self-report your scores, but then you have to provide proof once they've accepted you that proves those scores. So beginning it's a self-report, make sure you're being diligent to be sure that you have what you have and you know whether or not your school will accept a super score. Usually they will tell you if they accept a super score. Applications for colleges open on August 1st across the board, unless it's a rolling application school. Ozark is Hardwood Youth, that's a rolling application school. So some schools will accept applications all year long. They will evaluate your application and they will give you a response back within a time limit. And then they'll give you a potential start date. I know that when Eli applied to Ozark, he applied in fall and they had already filled their fall class, but they wanted to accept him, and so they accepted for the spring semester of the next year. So rolling applications look a little bit different. But then if you're not doing a rolling application school, you have several options. This is where it gets super complicated. I was like, what was that mean? All right, so here are your options for applying to schools. Regular decision. That's what all of us are used to if we went to college or we applied to college. You have a deadline, you turn your application in by a deadline, they mailed you back and answer in your mailbox, and you waited for that packet to come in your mailbox, and you get the answer. It's not like that anymore. So there's regular decision. Those deadlines are usually between December and March, and you get answers back between March and May for regular decisions. Early action. Okay, so there's early action, there's restrictive early action, and there's early decision, which is so complicated. I honestly still have to look it up every time I think about it, which is early decision is the colleges that have set an earlier deadline, usually in November. Again, these are probably the more competitive colleges. And the reason that they do this is because they want students who are incredibly interested in their school to show how dedicated they are by putting their application in very early. So Purdue is one, I learned this last year, that they fill their entire engineering class with early applications. If you apply regular decision, you're not getting into their engineering school, because they want to see how dedicated you are to get that in. And that's new. That's the last 4 or 5 years that this has happened. There might be some outliers and some exceptions. They're not accepting anybody out of the regular decision for their engineering school, because it's what they're known for, and they want people to drop their engineering school. Early decision has no restrictions on it. You can submit as many early decision applications as you want, but early action can have restrictions on it. So there's what's called restrictive early action. That's, again, that early deadline. But if you apply to a restrictive early action, let me make sure I'm doing this right. I'm sorry, I'm doing this wrong. I told you guys I have to look up every time I do this. Early decision is binding. Early decision is binding. So if you apply early decision, you have to take the appointment. That's why Purdue fills with early decision people. You are saying, if you accept me early decision, this is where I'm going. And they will, the only way that you can get out of that is if they submit a financial aid package to you that you say, I absolutely can't make this work, and I can prove that I can't make this work, then you can get out of that early decision or that early decision binding agreement. There are schools, University of Chicago is one of these schools, that wants really bad to take advantage of students who have applied early to other competitive schools and not gotten in. And so they have early decision 1, early decision 2, early decision 3. You have multiple times to submit to the University of Chicago and say, you're my first choice. You're now my first choice. And now you're my first choice. And you can continue, if you've been turned down from other schools, let me go to early action and then I can explain what that means. Early action, it can be restricted or not restricted. Early action is when you just apply at an early time. EA is what it's called. One of the schools that Gloria did that for that had that option was Baylor. So Baylor, you can apply early. You can apply to as many colleges as you want early action, and they don't care. Gloria also applied to Harvard. Harvard is what's called restricted early action. You can only apply to one private early action if you apply to a restricted early action. So, but you can apply to as many public schools as you want. It's only private schools that are in the restricted. So those kids who are shooting Ivy League, they can't apply restricted early action to Yale, Harvard, Cornell, everybody. They have to pick their top one. Once again, they're doing this because they want to see that they're your first choice. Well, Gloria applied, got all of her stuff in by the early dates, and Baylor called her and said, do you want us to move you to the early action pile? And she said, no, because I applied restrictive early action to another school, and you're private, so I can't go into that pool, because if I get into this other school, I'll be disqualified. And they were like, well, we're not restricted. And she goes, no, but they are. So you have to be really careful, because these admissions counselors will call you and try to talk you into something to put you in different pools and to determine exactly how serious your student is. Again, a lot of these schools now are notorious for making phone calls and talking to students and trying to feel them out as far as where am I on your list. Well, Baylor having that conversation with Gloria and knew that she was not the top of their list, right? They determined that right there. So regular decision, early action is non-binding. Restrictive early action is also non-binding. If you get into restrictive early action, it does not mean you have to go. The only one that's binding is early decision. That makes sense? That was a lot of information. Sorry, and I didn't think you guys anything much to follow. Application specifics vary by school. Almost all schools will accept either the Coalition app or the Common app. You go and you create an application, you create a profile on that application, you create an essay that's an identifying essay. I don't know, it has a word count, I don't remember how many words it is, maybe 600. No, that's too many. 300 maybe? It's not that long. I think Gloria's Common App essay, so that's what you do. That's like your general essay that's going to go to every school. And the prompt is, tell us something about yourself. Tell us about a decision you had to make in your life. Like, you can do anything you want, but it's really just very general. And students, if you want tips on this, I'm happy to work through with your students. They want to see the uniqueness of your child. They want your child to show how they stand out from their peers. So talking about, I'm a very determined student and I'm very passionate about business is not going to make your student stand out among 10,000 students. You want something that is absolutely out of the ordinary to be highlighted in what they're doing, and at the same time for them to highlight their strengths. Highlighting that's something that's got to be there. You can also apply through an organization called QuestBridge. QuestBridge is an organization that matches people who are have more financial need with the schools. And I don't have any experience with this. You have to go and see if you qualify, but you get to bypass all of the application fees, and they give you assistance in filling out these applications and making your application, and they will take your application and they will match you with schools that you don't even necessarily apply to. Maybe you didn't think you could get into, or you didn't know were close. They're an organization, but it's a pretty predominant organization, so they have a lot of clout. So if you're interested in that, look at QuestBridge. Some schools still require you to apply through their individual schools. College of the Ozarks is one of them. Hardwork U, if you guys have heard of that one, that you have to work your way through and you don't end up with debt. That's in Missouri. It's a really neat school. MIT, I know, does not use any of the common applications. You have to submit your application directly to them. So there's a handful of schools that don't accept this universal. When you go and you create a common app profile, you'll need to have your transcript with you, because you create your transcript even before your school submits your transcript. You're telling them, these are the classes that I've taken, and this is how many credits I have in them. And so all the students need to do is go visit Mrs. Wright and have a printed copy of their transcript so that they can have it in front of them to do that. The other thing you'll need is your demographics, who you are, where you live. They'll ask about your parents' education. A lot of schools put a lot of emphasis on whether or not you are a first-year college student. If no first-generation college student, if nobody in your family has graduated from college, your mother or father, that puts you in a different category. Additionally, a lot of schools put emphasis on rural students because they recognize that students who are coming from rural areas have less advantage than students who are coming from larger areas. And that's why making sure you get your demographics filled in well is important. As far as admissions go, you can get, they call them kickers. So first gen is a kicker, rural is a kicker. If you're a student athlete, that's a kicker. All those things change how the admissions team looks at you and makes you more attractive. The other thing that you will do is you'll enter your extracurriculars. What they say is put your most important extracurricular first. So the one that you've done for 4 years, and that can be a job. Like if you've worked for 4 years and that's really important to your course of study and what you're going to do, or it took the most of your time, put it first. Don't think that you have to put, like, I won the science fair in 9th grade first because you think that you won something that's most important. No. They really want them organized by importance and how they've driven you and how they've shaped you and molded you. It doesn't have to be an organized activity. So they're really big on this. If you come from a disadvantaged family and you have had to spend time caring for your younger siblings, you come home and mom's working and you've got 3 siblings and you can't go to a job and you can't go do science Olympiads. You're going to be home and get your brother off the bus. They want to see that. They want to know that was what took your time and that was your dedication. And they will absolutely acknowledge that as an activity, and they will look at that as responsibility and take from it what they would take from participating in chess club for 4 years. So don't feel like it has to be just school-sponsored or specifically organized activities. They want to know, again, what sets you apart, what has crafted and made you into the young person that you are today. Okay. That's pretty much everything that goes on the Common App. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, I was helping a young man with his college application. He was doing a Common App with a university. He was headed to Iowa State. And he said, I can do either the Common App or their application.
Yeah.
And I said, you need to evaluate which one highlights your strengths better.
Yes.
And he said, well, the Common App doesn't ask about certain things he felt like he did solid. And I said, then you need to do the regular application that highlights that. So
That's a good point.
look at your options and decide which highlights your students.
Yeah, so the Common App and the Coalition were created to be just a blanket, universal, everybody wants to know this stuff, put it on there. That's a very good point. I will say that when you go to apply, if you apply through the Common App, depending on the school you're going to, it will prompt you for additional information that is school specific as well. So Gloria had to do tons of supplemental essays for the schools that she was applying to. There are 2 supplemental essays for University of Chicago. And really, again, I don't know what your students are necessarily going for, but I learned last year, really be conscientious and careful about making sure that as you are applying for these schools, that you have some schools that are going to accept your student, that you feel very confident are going to accept your student. You have some schools, like they're saying, like your student is well above the criteria to get into those schools. That you have some schools that are target schools, that your students' grades, GPAs, scores, activities are right in line with what they do. And then if you want to do some reaches, if your student's like, man, I really love to go to Harvard. That's what my kids said. Love to go to Harvard. Okay, we'll apply to Harvard. We're going to get into Harvard. But we went through the process and we tried. If your schools are heavy on that upper side, your kid's going to get exhausted with all the supplemental essays. It is essay after essay, 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 essay. Gloria had supplemental essays on all over schools. Every one of them had supplemental essays. And looking back, I would do that differently. I would pick some schools that didn't have supplemental essays that she could just apply to with the Common App, so that those things could come in and she could feel good about getting accepted to them and have some options on the table. Like, it's a lot. And at the beginning of the year, and we're going to get into this, if you pick schools that all have this extra work and you want to fill out college scholarship applications, which are all essays too, kid is writing non-stop. It's a ton of writing, plus all the stuff they're doing at Trinity, plus a senior thesis. It can be absolutely overwhelming. So my advice is figure out where you're applying, pick some that don't require a ton. Pick some that are right in the middle, 1 or 2 that need extra stuff. So you do not get overwhelmed. We're so done with college essays by the time she forgot all her applications and she was like, I didn't want to look at it, so it's like, I hate that. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. Okay. Additionally, in addition to additional essays, some schools require additional recommendations. So Common App's going to give you the opportunities to submit teacher recommendations. And they will also, depending on the school you're going to, require a counselor recommendation. What does that look like here at Trinity? It looks like your student going to one of their teachers in a timely manner, not like my child did one day before something was due. Can you please write me a recommendation to do more things? In a timely manner, go to your teacher and say, would you be willing to write me a recommendation? If it's a college recommendation, because there are also recommendations for scholarships, but I'm going to talk about both right now. If it's a college application and they're applying through Common App, your student will send a link to the teacher. You've been on the other side of this. Can you just talk about this so that I didn't do any of these? So
the link just comes through. I wrote my essay out by hand, my recommendation, then you type it in, you submit, and you get an email back that says thank you for your submission.
And so then because they use the link, it's linked to that student directly.
Yes.
And you have the student has the opportunity to be recommendation blind, which means that their teachers submit the recommendations and they don't see what the teacher says about them. And Gloria and Wes, I think both did that because Dr. LaFountain told them that colleges look more favorably on students who are willing to let a teacher submit a recommendation to them without looking at it. So you want your student, if they're comfortable, if they're not comfortable, then don't put in, but to say, I'm willing to let my recommendation go through without it being seen by me. And that's on the student side. When they're asking for the recommendation, they will check that box. I'm willing to not see my recommendation. Counselor recommendation. Counselor recommendation for anybody other than a Monteen is going to come to Mrs. Monteen. So if your college requires a counselor recommendation, then your student needs to come to me. I cannot do a teacher recommendation and a counselor recommendation. So if they want me to submit a teacher recommendation, then we'll have to, I think Mr. Murray did it for Gloria. We could maybe look at Mr. Murray submitting a counselor recommendation to them. Because we're a small school, you just can't cross hairs with everything. And you want different voices speaking for your child. Does that make sense? Okay. Statement of faith. The school that Gloria ended up choosing required her to write a complete statement of her faith. She had to be able to articulate who she was in Christ, how she came to know the Lord, what the process was for loving Him and knowing Him and committing to being a part of His church and committing her life to Him. That was probably the hardest essay she had to write. She goes, I love Jesus. It's just so hard to put it down into words, what I want. So she rewrote that whole part. Generally speaking, with essays, it is very helpful for your students to get feedback from other people. Have them ask trusted friends. Have them ask you if you're willing to edit their essays. Have them ask a teacher. Have them ask a pastor, right? They pull people in and encourage them to take the feedback. If they tell you to cut this. Now, you may get different feedback from two people. Poor Wes, he gave me his essay and he gave someone else his essay. And we came back with completely different feedback for him. And so he had to evaluate between the two of us, going, I guess I'll take this one, this person. Figure out exactly how he wanted that essay to look. So that might happen too. Be aware that might happen too. But I think the more feedback, the better. Because then your student gets to hold things down to how they want it, how they want to present themselves. Counselor recommendation of faith. If you are applying to some of those higher level schools, an interview might be necessary. That is by invitation. So you don't ask for an interview. You don't say, and we'll call for our interview. They will ask to contact you on that. If you are applying for something like music, that will require an audition. And so you'll have to work through the School of Music, or if Mary wants to apply to dance programs, she'll have to go in person and audition in some of the dance programs. And so that's something else to have to consider. Also, when you are applying, several schools require FAFSAs. So just be prepared for the FAFSA is the financial application for federal student aid. Be prepared that that's going to be part of the process. Now, FAFSA was super late last year, because they were rolling out a new system. And so many of the schools that Gloria applied to early asked her to do the college board financial profile and submit it instead, which was expensive. It cost $24 per school we had to pay for her to set this off because FAFSA wasn't ready yet. And it was onerous. It was scanning documents and uploading documents and title it this way, and we didn't get that one. And we're not seeing this in here. It was a pain in the butt. So if you can avoid that and just pick the FAFSA. I'll tell you the FAFSA was simple as pie, guys. They link even if you're self-employed, they link your tax document electronically, and you fill in a little bit of demographic information if they ask for anything. Things I don't know, keep it in there. It was super easy. So FAFSA is the way to go, not college. Just get it wrong. If you can. Sometimes FAFSA, working on our system, can't pull it out. Probably like you guys can sometimes. Again, some colleges are need blind, but some colleges will put your need, what you need, into consideration, whether they accept you or not. And both ways. Some colleges want to show that they're accepting a certain number of students, and they have a certain amount of money that they need to give away for financial aid. Some schools don't have any money left, and if you need financial aid, you're not getting in, and they'll take that into consideration. It's completely dependent on the school. Decision options. When you apply and they say you will have an answer back on this day, or you'll know when you'll have an answer back, you can either be accepted, deferred if you're applying early, or waitlisted. Deferred means we can't make a decision right now, we're pushing you into our next pile. That was before I got from Harvard. They were like, yeah, we're not making a decision on you, you'll get a decision with a regular decision. And then she got rejected on the regular decision. Rejected is your own one. I have heard you can appeal a rejection, but we didn't go down that route. Like, I think it's just not worth it. If someone doesn't want you, they don't want you. Waitlisted is a super complicated one. Lori got waitlisted from both University of Chicago and Notre Dame. And that process was kind of a pain in the butt because they tell you you're waitlisted. They give you your results back. And then they tell you, Notre Dame was better than the University of Chicago, but they both want a letter of continuing interest. They want you to submit additional documentation of things that you've done in the last half of your senior year to be a kicker for them to give you a spot. What waitlisted means is we're not accepting you in the accepted class, but if not enough of those students take positions, then we're going to pull kids off of our wait list and give them the positions that weren't accepted by the accepted students. And historically, everybody pulls some kids off of their wait list because a lot of times everybody's accepting the same kids. And so those kids are going to end up however many percentage of them at this school, and then this school who accepted a bunch of these have open spots to fill. You have to wait. So you have to submit, you don't have to, but they want you to submit some supplemental information, and they don't really give you any timelines, except for Notre Dame. Notre Dame did say, you will hear back from between May 15th and May 31st, whether or not you're coming off the wait list. You have to acceptance day, national acceptance day is May 1st. And so everybody makes a decision May 1st. If you're waitlisted at a school you want, you still have to accept at your second school, make plans to attend that school, go through the whole process, put down the deposit, and then if the waitlist school comes back and say you've got a spot, you go back to that school and say, sorry, I got off the waitlist and I'm going over here. But you can't just wait to hear from the waitlist. So that was one of the frustrating things, is that Gloria kept submitting this stuff for waitlist, but she was charging full steam ahead with Covenant. And by the time May came around, she's like, I'm going to Covenant. I don't care if I get off of these wait lists. I've already gone through all this process with Covenant. Super excited about my roommate. I've been to a bit at Students' Day. I don't want to go to these other schools anymore. And you may find that, even though these schools were your dream schools, whatever, you've already charged for it, you made that decision. In July, Gloria got a letter from Notre Dame saying, we are dropping everybody off for our wait list except for 5 people and you're one of them. You could hear up to August 15th that we have accepted you. And Gloria was like, no, in the middle of July. I'm already going here. I just want to give you guys a full picture of what a wait list looks like. And I'm super grateful that neither of the schools that Gloria got waitlisted from were her top choice. And so it wasn't like she was holding out hope and waiting and waiting and waiting to hear back from them. It's a brutal process. That wait is a brutal process. So be prepared for that if it's on a wait list. I don't want that. I'm going to pivot to finances. Does anybody have questions about applying to colleges and how the application process and how the decision process works? No? Good. Okay. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of things. The information that the school uses to make a determination as to financial aid is that FAFSA document that determine it, right? They take that information, they process it in there, however they process, and they return to you. I brought Gloria's first offer from Covenant. This, and then her other school also gave us, it looks like this. These are what the tuition and fees are. This is what it looks like fall and spring. They will all divide it up fall and spring because semesters are, if they're on a semester system, semesters are different. Here are the scholarships and grants that we are offering you based on whatever, maybe your academics, Could be something that you're working on that fits with your program. Like if you apply for a music department, they give you a music. So you'll see all these things, and then you'll have a total of that. Then they'll give you your estimated costs after scholarships and grants, and then they go into your optional financial aid. If you qualify for federal loans that are subsidized federal loans, lots of people use loans to go to school, or he doesn't want to, but she qualifies for some. So this is what she qualifies for and what they recommend she gets. That's here. And then student employment. Both colleges offer student employment, where they say if students work an average of 10 hours a day, this is what we pay, this is what we can assume will work within the university. They can obviously also get a job off campus to supplement what they're doing. And then you have the estimate costs after financially. So you'll get this piece of paper and you'll look at it and go, and you want to throw up because it's so much money. We appealed this decision and they gave us more money. We asked for Gloria to apply for some different scholarships within the school, and they let her, and they gave her more scholarships. So don't think that this is it, and that's the end of the story. You also, if you receive a really good financial aid package, like maybe your kid qualifies for a presidential scholarship, no tuition at a school. Remember I talked about those schools that you know your kid can get into because they're well above. If your kid gets in tuition for either one of those schools, but they want to go to this school over here and that's what they get into, but it costs you more, you can bring this financial aid offer and say, this school is offering her, and I have a friend who did this. Her daughter got into a school, she got the presidential scholarship, which was free tuition and room and board. But that wasn't her top choice. She had another school, they took that offer to the other school, and the other school matched it. So, don't think that that's the end all be all, close the door on what's offered to your student. And I will tell you, nobody ever made us feel icky in that process. They were never annoyed with us for continuing to call. There are all kinds of like little nuts and bolts that they'll offer during the process. Like Gloria went to Admitted Students Day at Covenant, and the kicker for them was, we'll give you a $300 credit if you apply to come to Admitted Students Day, because they know if you get on their campus and you're part of their culture, you're going to fall off and you're going to go. And so they're trying to incentivize you being there. And when I got her bill just a couple of days ago, it didn't show that $300 credit. And so I emailed them and said, hey, we came for an on-campus event. I understood that there was a credit. And they came back to me in 2 days and said, you're absolutely right. You confirmed you were here. Your new bill shows your credit. Please see it below. You have to be diligent to stay on top of those things. And, again, I don't, with the school that Gloria's going to, I think it was an oversight. But for bigger, larger universities, my guess would be they just don't care. And so if you're willing to let those things go, they are more than enough to let those things go, right? I know that a lot of people think that going to a private institution is out of their budget or unbelievably not possible. But what we're actually paying for Gloria is less than we would pay for a public university. So swallow that for a second. Again, she got great scholarships. She's worked very hard and she's qualified for some things. But don't think that private schools are out of your realm of possibilities. They will work hard to offer financial aid to make themselves able to. In Illinois, I don't know if everybody knows this, there are criteria at most of the public universities that offer free attendance if you qualify, like U of I, if it makes less than $64,000 a year, you go for free. I know that Western, if you score above a certain score on your SAT, go for free. So if you're interested or willing to look at some of those things, look specifically at the colleges in Illinois. Additionally, there are a lot of scholarships that are specific in Illinois to residents if they're attending Illinois college. So pay attention to that. Gloria wasn't doing that, so we didn't pursue any of those. But those things are out there. Private scholarships. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. We're done. In the fall, many local and national organizations release their applications for scholarships. Some of them are super involved. Some of them are pretty easy. My recommendation is that if finances are a big deal for you, Fill out as many scholarship applications as you can, because you may get some that you didn't expect to get, and you may not get some that you didn't expect to get. That is our experience. Gloria was very blessed. She's going to school with $6,500 in scholarships outside of her institution. We were thrilled with that. 2 of them are national scholarships. 3,500 is national scholarships, 3,000 is local scholarships. So pretty much divided down the middle. All of them required writing. Every single one of them required a writing supplement. So they want to know what your student strengths are, why they should give them money to go somewhere. And I would highly recommend that you look at things that are very specific to you. So one of Gloria's biggest scholarships is from the Marine Corps Foundation. She qualifies for it because her dad's a Marine. Nobody else qualifies for these scholarships except for people whose dads are Marines. My dad's a Marine. And if Gloria's dad hadn't been a Marine, she wouldn't qualify. You can't have a grandfather who's a Marine. You have to have a parent who's a Marine. But there's all kinds of scholarships that are specific to that. In Minnesota, there's an organization called the American Swedish Institute. If you are of Swedish heritage, you can apply for scholarships to do abroad study, and they will fund your abroad study if you prove you have Swedish heritage. There are organizations like the American Legion Scholarship. You have a better chance of getting the American Legion Scholarship if you have somebody who is an American Legion member in your family. So when Gloria applied for the American Legion Scholarship, she used my dad's American Legion information. She didn't win any of those, but she still put it on there, to make sure that she had that connection to them. They felt like they were awarding a scholarship to somebody who exemplified their organization. Don't assume that your student doesn't qualify for a scholarship just because it says open to Bushville Prairie City High School students. Or don't assume your child doesn't qualify because it says open to all Schuyler County residents. Gloria applied to the McDonough County Republican Women's Association, whose application said this is open to students in McDonough County, whose residences are McDonough County. But I called and talked to the lady, and she said, absolutely, they go to school in McDonough County, they can apply. Rushville State Bank, if those of you remember who were at Chapel last year when they came and awarded Gloria her scholarship that she got through their foundation manages a bunch of scholarships. All of their scholarships that get listed say open to any Rushville Industry High School student, open to any Rushville Industry High School senior, open to any Rushville Industry High School senior. For some of them, we contacted them and said, will you consider a student who's not a Rushville Industry graduate, who's a Trinity Academy graduate? And the one place I had to really follow up with them like 10 times, they said, oh, yes, we can. But in other ones, we just submitted them and she won one of them. So I think that some of those are just old guard, right? They were written and established years ago for the Rushville Industry seniors, and they don't think about, there's a ton of homeschoolers now in Schuyler County, and there are kids that are graduating from Trinity Academy. So don't look and immediately say, oh, I don't qualify for that. Just ask. And chances are the organization will say, yeah, the McDonough County Women's Association awarded 2, they only had 6 applications. They want more applications. They want more people to be applying for scholarships. They want to give money. So don't discount the little piddly $500 scholarships they add up. I think you regrets. But again, if your kid's writing a ton of supplemental essays and writing a bunch of scholarships for things, weigh that and decide what's important. The last thing I will say is, ahead of time, try to be as organized as you can. So sitting down with your student, Gloria makes better spreadsheets than I do, but I do a better job of saying, okay, what's the next thing that you have to get done? What's due in November? What's due here? Okay, if Harvard is due in November and you have 3 supplemental essays to write from Harvard, and what date do you want to have for your first draft for the supplemental essays? So I sat down with her and walked through all of that, and we got all of our dates ready. And even then, it was really hard to get her accountable through that. She got a little frustrated. But I can't even imagine how hard it would have been if we were like, wait, it's due tomorrow? You have to. So go to, like I said, make that pointed decision about where you're applying, get all of that information into a spreadsheet ahead of time, and then work through it systematically so that you don't feel overwhelmed. This school that Gloria is attending was her last choice, and it moved to her first choice. Not because she didn't get into any other schools, because through the process and through visiting the campuses, and through a ton of prayer, she determined that this is where God was calling her, where she wanted to be. Don't discount the last choice. Or, don't feel like, well, if it wasn't given to this one, then never going to be one that's going to work. Just let God direct and decide. I prayed, Lord, close every door. She's not supposed to be her. Please, Lord, don't send her to Boston. I don't want to deal with that. And none of us cried when she didn't get into her. We were like, well, we tried. Okay. Okay, that was fine at that point. And again, she had already visited here and loved it. And honestly was saying at that point, I'm going to be it over her. I love him. I feel like that's pretty long. So visit the schools, let them show you who they are and pay attention to who they are. Her other first choice that she really, really loved, she started doing like online connections with faculty and students, and it became very, very clear what they elevated in their culture. All kinds of classes that she was able to like connect with, or they gave so much attention to gender studies and to transgender agenda. And she was like, oh, you can do it. You can do it if you want to do it. But that really turned her off. She was not interested in going and being in a place that saturated their culture. It wasn't that she actually did not necessarily want to go to Christian school. She also didn't want to be in a culture that was absolutely saturated outside of her faith and beliefs. And the more she interacted with some of these schools, the more she found that was the case, and that it turned her off. I'm not saying that's the same decision for everybody, but give credence to your last choice and apply to a wide variety as far as culture goes. I wouldn't recommend that anybody apply just to private, or private universities or just to public universities. Do this. That makes sense? Questions on financial aid?
What scene was it that she got to talk to the staff and students and that had?
It was Gustavus Adolphus in Minnesota. It's also a small liberal arts college. It's where Eric's mom went, so she was a legacy there. They were going to let her double major in Norwegian and in Viking studies, which is exactly what she wanted to do. That was the program that she wanted. It was a target school. They're right online with her SAT, GPA. Had an initial visit. They're hugely musical and mostly choral musical, which is where Gloria's strengths are. Like, if you looked on paper, that school absolutely fit. We have family in Minnesota. It's probably where Eric's grandparents grew up. Like, it's a beautiful town. You would think if you could pick a school for her, that would have been it. And she just kept getting turned off by these little things. She found out that they were bringing in a music artist for their Easter celebration, and the music artist was a rap artist whose lyrics were disgusting. And it's a free concert for everybody on campus. And they were celebrating. Oh, we're so excited to have this rap artist here. And she was like, what? That's who you're bringing in to celebrate Easter? It was so hard for her to jive with that. It was hard for me too. That one I was like, did you say that? So that's our experience. I'm happy to talk more about our experience if you have questions about specifics. Again, no expert. I've had one kid go through this. This is what I learned. One kid go through it. I bet Miriam's experience is going to be completely different. She's going to have performance auditions, right? Like, depending on what you're doing and how you're prioritizing different things. Like, it's just an experience for other kids, I guess. You've had kids apply to school. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, mine, it was different, like you say. That actually, was a deal by they want me to test scores because she was a COVID in high school.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, it's okay, you don't have to submit any. So she didn't. And strategy, right? This seems to be a good fit for her.
Right.
And then my other two, just they didn't want, my son's in the military, so he wanted to do community college and be able to do it online and not have it be too rigorous because he was in Djibouti when he took some classes,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And just memorized the boss of her own time. She wants to be outside, and so she does a lot of her school at night. But she did community as well, but she married him too, so that just worked out for her. But so Amy's just a different situation. She's just not. She wants to go 4 years for sure. She wants something very rigorous. She doesn't want party school, but yet she doesn't necessarily want to go to a Christian school. She's like, I don't apply what I've learned at Trinity. But I don't think she's totally opposed to Christian school either, but she's open.
It's so interesting, and honestly, I cannot express enough how much Gloria's mind has shifted since she's been accepted to this college. I was sharing with Sam earlier. Gloria applied to every school. The reason she chose Harvard is because they have an outstanding ancient languages program. Like they're the best in the country for ancient languages, and she can take a whole course there. They have a Scandinavian studies major. They're great in Norse mythology, which Gloria absolutely loves. She targeted that and Cornell specifically for that. She targeted Gustavus Adolphus specifically for that. She targeted Notre Dame because they have the Medieval Institute, which is the premier medieval history studies program in the entire country. Gloria is majoring pre-med, guys. She went to Covenant. She really started thinking about midwifery in her senior year after she took an anatomy class because she was considering doing archaeology. So she did an anatomy class. Absolutely loved this online anatomy class. I was like, yeah, I want to go. Wait, what? We get to Covenant and we're talking to the director of admissions, and he said, what's your major? And she was telling him, Covenant's not high on my list because they don't have anything Viking, they don't have anything ancient languages, they just don't have the things I'm looking for. She goes, but I have this little thing in the back of my mind where I'm maybe midwifery, and he was like, oh, that's interesting. We're launching our first med class next year. She was like, what? He's like, yeah, we spent 3 years crafting credits and coursework that are specifically designated to send godly men and women into the medical field. Like there's a class called The Theology of Suffering. And I know, I went, just don't, she shifted entirely. She's bring back to the minor industry now. Yes. What was JD's admissions process for Midwest Tech? Let's just do that real quick so that everybody in the room.
Yeah, so they are ones that they accept. They have a class every month. And so we sat in, and they had, it basically, there was a basic math test you had to do. So they had just kind of basic math. There were tests that you had to do when you have a GED or a high school diploma. And they had some different things as far as the scholarship side. They had a competition, and it was one of those deals. If you just show up for the competition, they automatically gave you a $500 scholarship. And so you went and spent the day, and then they also allowed you to go up to 3 times to these special nights where they actually showed you what they were going to be competing on. So you actually got to see the different types, because this is welding, and they got to do all that. And then they did, because they don't offer any academic scholarships, they did what was called a TikTok style. They're basically wanting you to do a creative TikTok style video to kind of show your desire, your creativity, and how you could tie it into the school. And they've got, I think, 5 or 6 schools across the nation, and he got 3rd. And so he got a quarter of his costs and fees covered. So it was like about $5,000. It's a $20,000 program. And well, I think I was like 21 by the time we did the competition and everything else. He ended up not doing, but yeah, so basically you did that video, and he did a compilation of like all the crazy stunts that he pulled the last 5 years with his friends, like peeling out cars. There was footage of right before his 4-wheeling accident. There was footage of sledding accidents, footage of him driving the tractor, blowing things up. I mean, literally all that stuff. And at the end of it, and he did it with his couple buddies, it says, "This is my next adventure." And he's walking into the school and shaking hands with the head of the welding department. And so he put this whole thing together with music. He did it with, Aaron helped him like cut and paste it and create it. And so, yeah, and they actually showed up at the house. They called ahead to surprise him, and they showed the giant check and the balloons. And we just thought, trade school, you're not going to have any, you don't get a special look. We just didn't think there was going to be any excitement. And they really are invested in generating that. So that was actually a really neat experience that I wasn't expecting.
I will say too, that brings up a good point. With the early applications, many of these schools, you are automatically considered for some of their elite scholarships if you apply early. So definitely look at that too. Laura did not apply early into Covenant, or she didn't apply by the deadline necessary, so she is not eligible for some of their biggest scholarships. And we didn't know that. We weren't aware, but definitely look. I know that Baylor also, if you apply by a certain date, you go into a pool where you are considered for their most elite scholarships and full rides.
That's what we did with Greenville. Both Brody and Aaron applied early, and then they were invited for a whole day on campus, and we did a whole series of interviews.
Yeah.
And obviously, Aaron ended up getting a full ride out of it. Brody didn't get anything, but I did think it was a really great experience of going and having to sit in front of a panel and be questioned by teachers and do your spiel and kind of, figure out who you are in front of all these people. And like I said, Brody didn't end up going there, but it was a really good experience.
So there you go. Greenville is one that does that. Yeah, I have a friend's daughter's at Greenville history. She did that. Do you have anything in that?
When did she start? And was
She goes. She was moving days August 22nd.
And where was that?
It's in Lookout Mountain, Georgia. It's right next to Chattanooga, Tennessee. 20 miles from Chattanooga, Tennessee, at the top of the mountain.
Beautiful.
It is one of the most beautiful places on earth. I'm not kidding. I went there with her for a visit, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I just want to sit in this place all day. Yeah, she's super excited. I bet. That's it. That's all I got. I guess I did go to a well done. Not all good people.